An ancient legend from the Indonesian island of Flores tells of a mysterious, wild forest grandmother who consumes everything, the Ebu Gogo. According to the tale, these tiny, hairy beings once lived in the tropical forests alongside modern humans, eating crops and occasionally human flesh. For years, ethnographers recorded the legend, noting details such as the Ebu Gogo's mumbling speech and long, saggy breasts, while assuming it was merely a myth. This perspective changed dramatically when the remains of a previously unknown, small human relative were discovered in a cave on the same island. The 2004 announcement of this new branch on the human evolutionary tree was extraordinary. Standing just over a meter tall, the species named Homo floresiensis had a small brain, but showed evidence of making challenging water crossings and crafting stone tools. Although much of their anatomy appeared primitive, their behaviors suggested they were advanced, human-like beings. The species was so unusual that the research team named it after the Hobbits from J.R.R. Tolkien's fictional universe. One of the most unusual aspects of the story of these tiny hominins is the suggestion that they might have survived into relatively recent times, roaming the tropical forests and ancient volcanoes as recently as 12,000 years ago. This date is surprising because it was thought that Homo sapiens were the only humans on Earth at that time, and it was long after modern humans had arrived in the region, tens of thousands of years after, in fact. Could it be that these hobbits lived alongside our species for all that time? After the media frenzy surrounding the hobbits, questions arose about a possible link between the Ebu Gogo and Homo floresiensis. From news headlines to scientific discussions, people began to wonder if these two beings might be the same. Were the locals imagining mythical forest dwellers, or were they reporting real creatures? Perhaps the seemingly fictional legend had some basis in reality. While the media pursued this idea, some scientists also considered it, fueling hopes that a living, breathing Homo floresiensis might still exist in a remote part of the island. This proposed link between the bones and the legend raises a fascinating question being explored by anthropologists worldwide. How accurately can oral traditions report historical events? Some researchers studying indigenous memory suggest that these oral traditions can reliably preserve records of real events from thousands of years ago. This raises questions about the boundaries between legend, memory, myth, and science. Did the people of Flores preserve an oral history of Homo floresiensis? Gregory Forth, an ethnographer from the University of Alberta in Canada, who first documented the Ebu Gogo legend, argued that anthropologists often too readily dismiss folklore as mere imagination. In contrast, some experts have noted significant similarities between the descriptions of the Ebu Gogo and Homo floresiensis. Both were described as having long arms and small statures. The detailed description of the Ebu Gogo, including the pendulous breasts supposedly thrown over her shoulders, was particularly striking. Forth even expressed regret that the size of female breasts could not be determined from paleontological evidence. However, there were significant issues with linking the ancient bones to the mythical Ebu Gogo. Firstly, the two concepts originate from different regions of Flores. The Ebu Gogo legend belongs to the Nage people, who live over 100 kilometers away from the Liangbua site, where Homo floresiensis was discovered, separated by rugged mountains and dense forests. The cave where the fossils were found is instead inhabited by the culturally and linguistically distinct Manggarai people. It seems odd that Ebu Gogo would be a Manggarai creation, considering its origin with the Nag. Additionally, stories of small forest beings are not unique to Flores. Similar legends exist elsewhere in the archipelago, where living, human-like primates are common. For instance, the Orang Pendek, short people, of nearby Sumatra, are thought to be based on orangutans. While Flores lacks orangutans, it does have macaques. Despite these inconsistencies, discussions about the Ebu Gogo continued. Expeditions sought to find living wildmen, and local reports claimed that such beings had been killed. a mockumentary inspired by real scientific discoveries. The Cannibal in the Jungle, 2015, dramatized a story about a cannibalistic murder in the forest, attributing it to a foreign researcher who was exonerated only after the discovery of Homo floresiensis revealed that the crime was actually committed by Ebu Gogo. Blending fact and fiction, the film combined real footage from the Hobbit excavations with fictional elements, including eccentric actors and fake headlines. It even featured interviews with real scientists whose genuine comments about the significant fossil discovery were integrated into the fictional narrative. The myth of the Ebu Gogo persisted despite skepticism from the scientific community. However, the evidence linking the Ebu Gogo to Homo floresiensis eventually became too weak to ignore. Each expedition aimed at verifying sightings either ended with empty caves or sightings of macaques. Further scientific findings, particularly a revision of the timeline that placed the disappearance of Homo floresiensis at nearly 50,000 years ago, rendered the Ebu Gogo connection highly improbable. To experts, the Ebu Gogo was as real as the Tooth Fairy. So, what should we make of the Ebu Gogo legend? Why does the idea of ancient wild men captivate us? Part of the fascination can be attributed to the scientific context. Over recent decades, as paleoanthropology has evolved rapidly, discoveries like Homo floresiensis have challenged our previous understanding of human history. For instance, it has become clear that the diversity of hominins during our species' existence was far greater and more complex than once thought, a realization largely triggered by findings such as Homo floresiensis and further supported by additional discoveries. The significance of the Ebu Gogo and Homo floresiensis may lie in how scientific breakthroughs, especially unexpected ones, can reshape our understanding. These small bones challenged scientists with surprising new information, sparking broad speculation. Homo floresiensis demonstrated that our past was more bizarre and varied than previously imagined, featuring unexpected evolutionary mixes, migrations, and habitats. While the Ebu Gogo legend did not align with paleoanthropological facts, such mismatches are not always the case. Folklore can offer valuable insights, as evidenced by how geological and paleontological discoveries have sometimes been inspired by myths. For example, the griffin, a mythical creature with a lion's body and an eagle's head, was likely inspired by encounters with dinosaur fossils. The relationship between science and myth is increasingly intricate and fascinating. If hobbits once existed on a remote Indonesian island, who knows what other possibilities the past might hold?